The serpent will come from the hole on the brown day of Bríd, though there should be 3 feet of snow on the flat surface of the ground. So that was a piece from Carmina Gadelica, Hymns and Incantations by Alexander Carmichael, who was a folklorist, and he collected that in 1900, or at least that was when the book was published. He largely did his research in Scotland around the Outer Hebrides, so it's Scots Gaelic. A lot of his critics now say that there wasn't one piece that he published that he hadn't kind of reworked or touched. So whether or not it's fully accurately from those places is unknown, but I thought it was really a lovely incantation for Bridget. And when I read it, it said incantation, like to be sung, but there was no melody. And this melody just came to me one day when I was reading it, and I stuck with it. I kind of like the idea that this song would coax spring to come up from beneath the soil, and I usually sing this on St. Bridget's Day or St. Bridget's Eve. Imbolc in the belly is also St. Bridget's Day. I think it's important to acknowledge some things that the older Celtic festivals are also special days for the church calendar, and I think Ireland is especially fortunate in that sense that Christianity was never enforced on us, and so there's a lot more blending in Ireland with the older traditions. So if you think about it, St. Bridget's Day is Imbolc, like St. Patrick's Day is the equinox, or if you think of like Samhain and All Souls Day, like Lunasa and Shrove Sunday, they're all kind of interwoven into the Christian calendar. And I did Celtic Civ in college, and I think that was one of the most interesting things to learn about is, you know, the Catholic Church is actually a window into older Ireland. And in a sense, it's a shame that it's dying out, whether or not people, I mean, they did it themselves with all the horrible things they did to people, but it's a shame that that's kind of dying now as well, because with it will die the older ways and practices of the people of Ireland. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience of St. Bridget's Day and some of the folklore and rituals I've experienced around it. So I'll mention 3 kind of thoughts or memories that I have in association with the folklore, and I will sing 2 more songs for you. Ascuelga. So the first thought I'd love to talk about is as a child, my first exciting memory about St. Bridget's Day was with my grandfather, and I lived with my grandparents until I was 9. And on St. Bridget's Eve, when darkness had fallen, Grandad would get me and my sister and march us down to the bushes in the back of the garden with a fistful of rags in his hand, and he would distribute them among us, and we would tie a rag really tight on the bushes for every member of the household. And the idea was that they would be left out overnight, and that was when Bridget would come and bless all of the earth, I guess, and these rags would be included. But it was a very exciting thing to wake up in the morning and like rush out and see whose rags were still on the bushes, and more often than not they were all always there. I think we double knotted and triple knotted them, to be sure. I guess the tradition is called Bhratach Bríd. I know in other places they were used to cure sore throats and headaches. We as a family would just kind of see it as luck and health for the year. I don't ever recall keeping the rags to cure anything, but it was a nice tradition to engage in with my grandfather. So that's my first thought. I suppose my second thought leads into my second song, when I was 9, I moved to Northwest Clare with my mother and my sister, and I remember being in secondary school and my mum arriving unexpectedly at the school and taking us out with some bogus excuse. My mum studied folklore, so I think there's a great love she has for these kinds of things, so she thought it was important to bring us to this. And it was St. Bridget's Day Mass in Liscannor. So St. Bridget's Well is very well regarded among shrines to Bridget. It's kind of a meeting place for all of the communities, in a sense. Like, people will go and bring mass cards of the dead, and they will leave trinkets every time they go there. There's a big grotto for Bridget, and just a well-loved spot. I mean, we lived near there for a little while, and just people would go for walks, and if anyone comes to visit, like, you'd take them there. It's on the way to the Cliffs of Moher anyway, but it's just such a magical little spot to go. So anyway, she brought us to this mass, and it was led by a man called Dennis Crosby, and he is the parish priest in Liscannor, and he's a very spiritual man. I think, if he, on the off chance if he hears this, I think you're really, really wonderful, and you do a lot of meaningful work for people, especially performing these kinds of ceremonies, connecting people to place. But arriving there, it was lovely. There were reeds around the grotto, and people were, working on their crosses, and they'd make 4-pronged crosses for the humans to hang over their door for the year, and they would make 3-pronged crosses for the animals to protect them. And at a certain point, people would start to queue up, and the priest stood kind of at the top of the steps of the grotto, and what he did was he had a hazel hoop on the ground, and you stood into it, and he would pull it up over you and spray you with holy water, and it was kind of like a blessing from Bridget for the year. And it's a very special place to be doing a very special thing. And I remember being on Inishman, and I went to the summer school for adults to improve your Irish a couple of years ago, and we met a lovely woman called Maura who looked after us because we were camping with no access to running water. So she was very sound. Anyway, she was telling us that Bridget's Well is very special to the islanders, and that they would go not only on St. Bridget's Day but on Lunasa as well. So those two festivals are united in terms of the islanders going over. And one interesting tradition I found out about was that's practiced still on the Aran Islands, and also this priest in Liscannor has a few of them, is the tradition of Bríd jogs. So I remember I actually found out about it because I was singing at something in Liscannor Church, and the priest took us into the back room to show us these Bríd jog dolls, and they're straw dolls who wear clothes. And they're really incredible. I think the tradition is more often than not that they'll wear communion dresses and things like this. But the idea is basically that on St. Bridget's Eve, the little girls will make these Bríd jog dolls out of straw and put dresses on them, and then go around to every house, and then Bríd jog, the doll, is welcomed in, and they will take a piece of the straw and they will make their own Bridget's cross from this. So she's like, the little girls are bringing Bridget's blessings to every house basically, and this is like the Bríd jog that travels around. So funny enough, when I heard about this, the first song that came to my mind was Bríd jog ní Mháille, and so I thought it would be a lovely little song to sing alongside this. Is a Bríd jog ní Mháille, stúdóg má críost, squirtú ar in jaca,
an bos 3 ceart lor mo crí. Tána míl de faring ró le éidean ciúin órach. Is godug tú bharachtaach a hir orgal mos fear. Níl ní bisolja, non cealach os ceannatália. No blob an norna, bías ag fós an dragjan. O súd mar bhías ma grosa, níos trilsí le bhreachtacht. Béilín méile na hóliachta, nach an clean. Is buacail jasoig mé, tá tríl gan mo posta. Sní búr ní far bio mé, mar a bhaid mé momian. Acús leis a storín, déan réad agus bhí ramsa. Cean an achtain dawnach, bóithríonn dan sliabh. Is tír seachas brónach, a calm se an dawnach. Má chadal am a dorn, smé go snow go drum. Smé gaur na bóra, bíon mo grosa ag galan. Si ag farel a posta, is gani velam. Is gani velam. Is gani velam.
So that was Bríd ní Mháille. I would love to clarify that that is about Bríd Og, young Bríd, and it's not a love song about a man falling in love with a straw doll and she marries someone else. So just to clarify that, but it would be a very hilarious subject matter for a song. So the next little piece I'm going to talk about is just a personal memory that I think of when I think of Imbolc and St. Bridget's Day. My good friend's mother passed away a couple of years ago, and I remember her funeral really well, and I often associate it with Imbolc and St. Bridget's Day because when the priest, who is the same priest who does the Mass at Bridget's Well, when he gave the sermon, he said, or the eulogy, he said, in our beginnings are the seeds of our endings. Our beginnings are the seeds of our endings. And then he said that he met Gabby, my friend's mum, in a field with her in-laws, and she shouted over to him as he was passing by, "Will you come in here and show my French in-laws how to make St. Bridget's crosses?" And he said, "I will." And he went in and helped them, and they had a great time, and I think they became good friends after this. But he said, "This is how I met Gabby, and this is how I will say goodbye to Gabby." And up from the altar he pulled a reed, which he had prepared, and every reed that he held up, he said, "This is a blessing for Gabby." And then he took the next one and started to make the Bridget's cross. And he said, "This is a prayer for her husband." And he took the next one and he said, "This is a prayer for their daughter. This is a prayer for their son. This is a prayer for their daughter. This is a prayer for all of her family." And it was just such a moving moment. Yeah, I don't know, was there a dry eye in the house? It was really beautiful. Whenever I think of Imbolc or St. Bridget's Day, I think of Gabby and her family. So I was actually asked to sing at the funeral, and so I'm going to sing the song I sang at that funeral.
Críost,